Hello! Welcome to another Video Waves update slash talk on general social issues. Today we're going to talk about some new updates we have in Video Waves coming soon to everyone. Is wipe patterns, using wipes instead of chroma key, luma key, or blending modes. A bunch of new LFOs that have been thrown into all the new stuff, and then also going over some of the fun stuff with new color space things and new geometry things. But first off, I'm going to talk a little bit about, so there's this general sense, and this is actually, it's not completely like off topic in terms of like speaking about video waves or VSC RPi or the video synthesis ecosphere in general, because sort of this motivating question for this first part of the talk is this message that I get on a regular basis, almost every day. Someone messages me somewhere saying, please, I need help installing video waves, or please, I wish there was some way, I can't understand how to DIY my own wave pool. And they tell me about how basically they don't feel like they have any confidence at all that they can achieve like the task at hand. And usually my response is 100% of the time, just read the documentation, go through all the steps, and if you just follow the instructions, you will actually manage to make it happen. You know, my stock response for the building like a wave pool or something is that I've literally made Lego projects that are more complicated than this. I've made some pretty complicated Lego projects with my nephew. And none of like very few of them have been simpler than putting together a wave pool. But yeah, it just sort of like, it makes me mildly concerned that there is just this general, what seems to me is just this general sense of like helplessness and sort of hopelessness, this feeling that people have that they are just like unable, like there's just something fundamentally like it's something like internal to them that just makes them fundamentally unable to do something like install a program that has more steps than just double click and press OK, or to put together a little like Raspberry Pi based video synthesis project that has more steps than just I buy things and plug them in. And honestly, too, people seem to have like a lot of general fear and anxiety about when they buy the V-Serpy from me, and they get them and they're just like, how do I plug things in? Oh my god, I don't understand this. Even though there's literally only one way to plug things in. If you just like run through, like if you just look at it and like try to plug things in, you'll find there's only one way to do it. So it's sort of a thing where you just like, people just sort of like have this, it seems to me that people just give up. They have this sense of just like giving up and admitting defeat before they even try something. And that seems like concerning because, I don't know, it just seems like that a lot of general sorts of, there's a lot of like terrible side effects of this sort of general like hopelessness. And I think it's not entirely unrelated to like, you know, the rather intense like amounts of depression, drug abuse, anxiety, and a lot of just general like mental issues that like Americans seem to have nowadays. All seem to like have this sort of like unifying thing of just this feeling of like, as an individual, people don't feel like they have any agenda. They don't feel like they have the ability to learn new things. They feel like there's just like the sense of like, okay, there's Andre over there. Andre's a genius. Andre's, you know, a special person or something. But there's no way I would ever be able to do anything that Andre does because they're a genius and I'm just like stupid or something. I'm just naturally stupid. Like, this is paraphrasing, but this does actually reflect interactions I've had with people since starting the whole business and open source software thing, is people just like seem to have this sense that they're just like dumb, that they're just like fundamentally unable to like do these sort of basic simple things that like I do on a regular basis and I've teach people how to do on a regular basis. And it's like, I'm usually just like, I've shown people how to do this like hundreds of times at this point. I know and I know for a fact this is 100% achievable. Anybody can do this. The thing is that you just have to you have to take one step farther than just like buying something. And that's, I think, part of the major issue here is there's this kind of like consumerist sort of ethos that says like you should just be able to buy something. You shouldn't have to like expend any sort of mental energy or any sort of emotional energy. You shouldn't have to like invest anything more of your time into that, because if you just put money down, that's the only thing that matters. That's the important thing. If you just are able to throw money at a problem, it makes it go away. And it's sort of fucked up if you think about it. Like there's this idea that like it's just a question of throwing money at things, and there's nothing that you would ever have to do internally. And it kind of bothers me, and it's something I actually want to actively work to sort of like counteract. It's a big reason why I'm really trying hard to like get out of the whole selling things business entirely, is because a big part about selling things to people, about convincing people that like consuming, like purchasing something is like the right thing to do, is sort of giving them the idea that this is something difficult, something they could not do on their own. And I felt really sort of conflicted about this, like basically the whole time I was like selling the Raspberry Pi things. And I'm still pretty conflicted about it right now. I'm still selling them here and there and really trying hard to stop. And, you know, more Patreon support is going to help me out in that front, and it also helped me be able to spend more time making documentation and talks like this, where I can sort of like try to help people through it one step at a time. I can't do it one-on-one. That's the other thing too, is that there's just too many people out there interested in this sort of a thing for me to be able to offer one-on-one support for people anymore. It's just literally unfeasible. Like the sheer bandwidth of like questions I get asked, or how many times I get asked for like help on just like basic video things, is just completely beyond my like time and energy to like be able to respond to these things one-on-one anymore. If I'm gonna help people, it has to be like a larger scale thing where I'm making YouTube videos, I'm redesigning my website to like offer people help. But yeah, so this consumerism bullshit, which I was definitely a part of and still kind of am to this day, is just this idea of convincing and it's making sure people feel helpless and hopeless, feel like they're unable to like take care of things themselves, that like the DIY solution has to be by nature like a shitty solution. The only way to like the only real way to like make things happen is to like throw money at a genius, throw money at an expert, and get them to solve your problems for you. And that, combined with the fact that I'm really honestly like I kind of feel like there's like a huge sort of problem too, where there's this fetishization of like gear for like creative purposes, this sense that like, you know, that there's this idea that all you have to do if you want to become good at like some sort of like creative artistic pursuit, the first step is that you have to buy a lot of things, you know. And I find this to be a really truly objectionable like idea, because honestly, creativity is actually the more sort of restricted you are in your creativity, I think in some ways it actually like makes you more creative and try harder. The more money and technology you have, sometimes, so there's, I'll come back to this later. So it's not quite as simple as that, but a lot of the times it does feel like throwing technology and throwing money at the idea that you want to become an artist is sort of like, you do it instead of developing an artistic voice of yourself. You do it instead of developing like skills and craft and like spending the time learning things. And I don't really like want to become a part of that either. Like this whole idea that you just like fetishize like gear and say, oh my god, I've got this amazing mixer, or like all the people like the you know, you can go on like Reddit any day and look at like synthesizer groups, and 99% of what people are posting is just pictures of their studio, or pictures of something I just bought, pictures of the objects, and that totally like dwarfs the amount of like people sharing like, this is what I actually make with this. I make music with this. You know, it's not about making the music, it's about buying it and displaying it. And that's a sort of like consumer art idea, where the important thing is just that you've bought it and you own it, and that's how you become this sort of like you've purchased the identity of like a creative person, but you're not actually doing anything creative with it. So that's something else I would like to be working against and not supporting anymore. And I'd also like to sort of like try to make this a cool thing that other people would want to do too, because at the moment it seems like, you know, there's the video that there is a growing world of people working on like developing like DIY or like non-corporate funded like video synthesis technologies. And I would sort of like to encourage as many of the people involved in this to sort of sidestep the whole obnoxious consumerism model, to open source their designs and try to focus on like the idea that sharing information and sharing technology and sharing resources and helping educate people is a better way to go about doing things than just trying to like profit off of this sort of idea, profit off the idea of encouraging hopelessness and encouraging like consumerism, like purchasing an artistic identity instead of developing one. Yeah, so I'd like to encourage more people to do that, and I think, you know, like at this moment, like it's sort of like if I'm able to sort of like prove to a large number of people that like I'm able to be like a successful, happy, loved, I don't know, at the very least, like thought fondly of like a human being in the video art world, then maybe that is just like the sort of like evidence that other people will need, that are like, oh shit, I can do this too. This is something that like if I go out of my way to sort of like share information, share technology and all this stuff, then I can also be like in good, you know, be as cool as Andre or whatever. I don't know. It's all like this. This probably also seems like just like massively arrogant in a lot of ways, but I mean, is what it is. And I guess the other reason I can think of for this general sense of like hopelessness, anxiety, helplessness that people seem to have has a lot to do with this sort of complete lack of feeling like you have any sort of political or economic like agenda in the world. Like the complete lack of the idea that you are able to affect the world in like these sort of basic like economic and political ways. Like the idea that most people do not feel in this country. I do not think most people feel like they are represented politically by anyone. You know, when you talk to people, most of what you hear is that, you know, politicians are crooks. They're all crooks. They're all just like looking out for their own interests. And the best you can do, and what you actually have to do, is just sort of like vote for the lesser of two evils, and hope that that is going to like make sure that like you and the people who generally speaking look like you or in the same class as you are not going to be the ones who get fucked over this time. So it's a sort of sense of like forcing you into like this Malthusian like calculation of like, well, at the very least, if I vote for Trump, then my family will not be worse off in 4 years than if I voted for Clinton. Or the sense of, if I vote for Biden, you know, like the people who were voting for Trump were like, for the most part, small business owners. You know, there's this sort of like myth that it was just like poor, ignorant people. For the most part, Trump supporters were people who would be like lower middle class, like people who owned property, people who were landlords, people who had like small businesses. And these were the kind of people who used to be a pretty fundamental part of the Democratic Party core constituency. And these would be people who felt like they were completely abandoned and betrayed by Clintons and Obama, in terms of how many people got fucked over by NAFTA in the 90s and how many people got fucked over by the economic collapse of 2008. and did not receive any sort of assistance, financial assistance, help with their mortgages, while the entire like Wall Street system was bailed out. So these are people who felt literally like they were completely betrayed. Like there's this sort of liberal idea that Trump supporters were these hateful like bigots and just these sort of like cartoon characters that you like should poke fun at. But the reality is, if you actually like are someone who goes out and like interacts with people in like outside of like very large metropolitan areas in this country, is that there's a lot of there's actually a pretty wide range of people who were highly supportive of Trump, mostly for the selfish reason of they felt like they weren't going to get fucked over worse. They felt like if they voted for Clinton, that would just lead to even more sort of like economic treachery on their part. So yeah, there's that, and then there's the feeling like, oh, if I vote for Biden and like the Democratic sort of like core constituency now that like working class people were abandoned would be like administrative class people who like are doing sort of like the clerical and like office work for like large businesses, or universities, or anything that's like that requires a very large number of people doing like data entry, doing like managing like the information technology shit. People who work for insurance companies, banks, finance, real estate, like these are sort of like core Democrat like constituents now, and these are people who feel like people like Trump are just looking out for they're looking out for these like uncouth, like racist, sexist, nasty, xenophobic like poor people. We got to make sure that us the gentle NPR listeners of the country like are going to be looked out for. So yeah, there's a sort of sense of like there's a very polarizing political system which just like makes people feel like they have no choice but to sort of be like selfish and like vote for someone who they do actually understand and know is like morally reprehensible, but they just feel that it's less morally reprehensible than the other option, which is to like fuck over their families, fuck over their future. Because I think most people are usually acting in the interest of like trying to like help the people that they love. They're not, it's much less motivated by like hate than like I think a lot of people feel like. So yeah, there's not really anything like video waves can do to help that. I just also think that like opening up conversations about this sort of thing is like the first step into like trying to figure out what else can be done about it. That's pretty much all I can do at this point, is just try to like state these things that as I understand them, and say maybe we can talk about these and be slightly more open about these topics, instead of like allowing them to like polarize and like further like harm people. Yeah, I guess the other thing is like the complete lack of like economic agenda in the world. This idea that like most people feel like the only way to get like property nowadays, if you want to like buy something, you pretty much have to have someone in your family also own property in order for that to go up as collateral for your first loan, or for someone else to some sort of inherited wealth to come your way, so that you can then use that as collateral to then go incredibly absurdly into debt in order to purchase like some property of your own. And this is just kind of like noxious and like absurd, and has sort of created like a completely failing system that everyone is sort of like noticing the seams sort of like start to split open on. And again, I don't think there's anything video waves can do to help with that, but again, just sort of like making it a conversation that people can have is the first step, and making it a conversation as opposed to making it an argument, like making it something that people can talk about and actually exchange views on, instead of like the sort of like state of current political debate, current socio-political debate for Americans is to like call people out, bully people, tell them that they're awful pieces of shit, and then try to like cancel them in some way or the other. And that's like literally not how politics works. Like if you're insulting people in politics, then you've already failed. It's like trying to get things done in politics is primarily about, making compromises with people who you disagree with. So the first step to making a compromise with someone who you disagree with is to understand where they're coming from and try to give them the most charitable assumption on their motives as possible. Because you can't actually you can't make a compromise if all of your opponents are like mortal moral enemies. If you've already started off with saying, well, these people are basically evil, so there's no compromise that can be made, then you've completely failed. That is what's known as complete political failure. The only recourse is to try to invite someone, make sure that you are able to get someone else who has a whole bunch of guns and is willing to threaten other people with violence in order to solve your problems. And that's sort of how politics works in this country, is when people say you have to be realistic about reality expectations, you have to be realistic about what you can do politically here. Ultimately what they're saying is that the reality is that someone else is going to beat you up, put you in jail, do something fuck you over financially, so you are in debt for most of your life and unable to even consider entering what we can call the middle class here. And that's a complete failure of politics, is when you have to threaten people with violence to get anything. But yeah, just trying to open up topics of discussion here. And this is sort of related. I think all of these things are related to this sort of general sense of helplessness, hopelessness, anxiety, and depression in this country now. And the first step to helping people with depression is giving them a chance to talk about things and making people realize that it's not actually their fault. It's not really anyone's fault now that political system is like this. It's not really it's some people's fault. It's not most Americans' fault that they feel hopeless and depressed and useless and they have no ability to learn things or devote any time to doing something as simple as installing open source software on their system. It's the first step is to let people know that they can do things. There are things that they can do, and it's not hopeless. They're not helpless. That it's just simply byproducts of this sort of abhorrent consumerist society that we live in, and this completely useless and pathologically comical travesty of a political system that we have. Yeah, so I think that is about it for the social theory part of this. And so now let's talk a little bit about video waves updates. Alright, so the first really cool thing that I want to show y'all is the white patterns, and I've been showing you that this whole time. So most folks who have worked with a hardware video mixer before know that you have white patterns to work with, and those are, even the cheapest and most janky video mixers will still have some way to sort of create some sort of a mask and then wipe between multiple channels. And this is sort of one of the primary sort of tools in using video mixers with no inputs, or using video feedback on a video mixer with the internal feedback, is to sort of channel the flow and the movement of the video feedback with wipes. So I set up a system in here. So if we go into mix and key, we can see that we have, if you go into key mode, you can select luma key, chroma key, or white pattern. And that's what I'm in right now. And then there will be 1, 2, 3, 4 different masks you can select. I've created 4 default masks. The first one is rectangle. The second one is, of course, heart wipe, the most important wipe of them all. I think there was someone on Instagram who was saying that I was being sarcastic about adding heart wipes to this. I think you probably, if you think I'm being sarcastic about heart wipes being the best, I'm guessing you probably haven't been paying attention to who I am. I do try my best to not be a sarcastic and cynical person. Not sure how well I succeed if people are still thinking that, but it's good just to kind of throw that out there. Sarcasm and cynicism from bearded white dudes on the internet is, I think, sort of the bane of any sort of like technological based like art movement. So let's sort of all of us bearded white dudes can maybe try to like work together to sort of like not be grumpy, sarcastic edgelords or whatever. So heart wipes, and then we've got seven-sided star wipes, and of course Mandelbrot. Mandelbrot fractal wipe, the Mandelbrot set. I always forget if it's Mandelbrot or Mandelbro. I know that they were raised in France, but they're Polish. So I forget. I think in Poland it would be Mandelbrot, and in France it would definitely be Mandelbro. But yeah, I need to double check on that. And so the way that the wipes work too is that you'll be able to load up your own wipes. You won't be able to do it with like a drag and drop thing, but what you'll do is you can basically use the wipes provided as templates, and then you make these sort of grayscale masks in like any sort of imaging editing program, and then you just load them into the bin file. And I'll make tutorials on how to do that and put that in the manual once the final version comes out. But yeah, using your own customizable wipes, and you'll only be able to use 4 at any given time. I think that's probably about the limit of like what we can do right now. And of course, if we get enough funding on the Patreon and I get to the point where I'm able to start working like full time on like making like a sort of like a user-friendly like front-loaded like version of Video Waves, then we'll be able to like figure out more stuff like drag and drop kind of dealios. Yeah, and then you'll also be able to use this text mod thing. I'll go into that more on a different video, I think, and that will be using one of the video inputs as a mask, as like an animated mask to go between multiple video channels. But yeah, we'll just stick with that. And you'll be able to do things like, so I'm using LFOs to move the wipes around right now. So let me actually go back and set this up, and I'll turn off the LFOs for the wipes. So that's just down here in mix and delay mode. So if I just turn the amp down to, so control click 0, control click 0. So you can do text editing. You can actually do this on the version of Video Waves you have right now. If you just control click on anything and then enter a number in, that'll work. I've also been setting things up so you can actually just reset any of the individual modules here, or reset everything on the module with all of these buttons here. So resetting things back to defaults will be a new feature in the new version of Video Waves. A lot of people have been asking about that, and I've been sort of frustrated about it as the development goes on, so really kind of had to happen. So you can do things like move it around X and Y just manually to place it wherever you think is right. You can do this Z, so that kind of zooms it in, and this is sort of the version of like wiping in and out. This will be default way of sort of like what the T-bar would do on your video mixer with the wipe pattern. We can rotate them too. So I got this Sony FXE that allows you to have these like rotating square patterns. I thought they were pretty fun, and you know, just automated movement in the video feedback world is always pretty nice. And you'll also be able to do some sort of tiling modes with these. So tiling modes, you can get pretty fractal with them. There's a couple of different modes. This one, tiles, the tiling sort of stays the same, and then you rotate things within the tiles. Tiling amount sort of changes the spacing of the tiles. There's the alt rotate, which allows you to sort of like rotate the entire mask, the entire tile thing as a mask. And then there's this spiral mode, which kind of spiralizes the shape. Kind of silly. Thought it would be just fun to throw it in there and try it out. I'm not sure how actually useful it'll be, but fun to try things out, you know. So yeah, that's the basics of wipes. Wipes are going to be a lot of fun, and get ready to see a lot of pretty crazy videos about that once I get to the next step of basically just been like loading everything into the first frame buffer, testing it all out completely, and then I'll just be able to sort of like cut and paste, add it to all the other frame buffers. So what else does we got for the new one? Let me pull up. Let's go back to wipes because wipes are pretty fun. Keep that one right there. And let me reduce the delay amount. And go into color space 1. We'll show you some color space things. So let me just add a little bit of movement here. So color space, we switch things off so we have like hue offset instead of in addition to hue, saturation, and bright offsets. And these just sort of do a different way of playing with the color space in addition to attenuation. So being able to control both of these will sort of add a lot to the whole process. We've also got a power map, and this is sort of like, think of this as kind of contrast, increasing the contrast on a per channel basis. So you can see that like it'll allow you to sort of like restrict the ranges in different ways. And I'll probably do some more videos that go into this in a lot more detail. We can change overflow values of like the other saturation and brightness, and that'll give you this sort of like wrapping around thing that happens when you go high or low. Same thing with brightness. You can fold it or wrap it, and those will just do, they're basically like distortions. They're slightly different kinds of distortions you can do on the color. So that's color space 1. Color space 2 is about sort of like how do you make the color a little bit like worse in some fun ways. So we can quantize the color. So Hue Quantize, you can mix the quantized version with the original one, and that's just 0 to 1, and then you can choose basically the bits, the amount of bits that your color has, sort of. Not quite, but you can think about it that way. So we could be like, oh, I want 32-bit color, and here we go. You can quantize all of the color spaces. So if you've played with video mixers before, what this is doing is it's an individual channel version of sort of like what posterization is, or paint mode is what they call it sometimes. This is posterization or paint mode on a per channel basis. And it gives you, usually there's only like, you know, like 2, 4, 8, like really basic controls for that, but you can, default controls would be up to 128, and then you can go up into the ranges and say, oh, I want to go up to 512 for everything, and change that up. Yeah, so that's these quantize things. There's also dithering. Dithering is a lot of fun. So you mix the dithering in, and then you select the amount of dithering that happens. And dithering and feedback are going to do some pretty amazing stuff. So once we get down to these like low numbers, you can see we're getting a lot of interesting textures, new kinds of things happening. It's going to sort of add to the whole sort of like, it'll make the whole kind of cellular automata thing that the feedback does like much more pronounced to quantize things in this manner. So playing around with the amount of quantization and the amount of dithering will give you a lot more control over the textures. And you can dither per channel too. I'm wondering if there's, actually it seems like it might be a good idea to have like a lock key for these two, so you could lock the dithering for each one and lock the quantization. I'll think about it. So that's that. We'll just bring that back to hit the reset, turn all of those off. Geometry things that we have. So we've changed around a bit of the geometry. So you can rotate in the normal way now. But something I noticed when you rotate, and let me wipe myself out a little bit more. Woo! So the rotation here is a perfect circle. Like the feedback part is very circular, but the thing that you'll notice if you like do a lot of like keying based feedback stuff is that it warps the original image. So we're not preserving aspect ratio inside of this. So there's a different rotate mode that actually preserves the aspect ratio of the video that you're working with. So that's this FBO rotate mode switch here, and you'll be able to go back and forth. If you want perfect circular rotations, you can do this, and if you're working with stuff where you want to sort of preserve this aspect ratio, like if you're working with figures and then keying out the background and like rotating the figures around, you'll find doing it this way will make sure that your figures don't look weird and stretched, or that they don't get sort of warped in the whole process. So that's rotate mode. Let me reset this stuff because we're going to go into Geometry 2. Oh yeah, Geometry 1 also has shear matrices. So probably not too many folks have played around with this stuff before. I know that as far as hardware mixers go, there is one called the Grass Valley Indigo, and that actually has a bunch of individual matrix controls for things. But these will just allow you to sort of do the basic sort of like corner pin adjustments for the frame and warp things in and out that way. So pretty fun. That's Geometry 1. And Geometry 2 is, we have this fisheye. So fisheye, or barrel distortion, sort of like gives you this kind of lensy thing. And you can go in or out, positive or negative on that one. You can also change the sort of like focus point of like where the center of your lens is. And that'll do some pretty fun warps as well. We'll get this weird spiral thing happening in there too. So that's fisheyes. We have this spiral thing too. Ooh, all the ranges got reset. Oh, found a glitch. Ha 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 ha. Always good to find glitches. So spiral is different from rotating because spiral actually makes like a little spiral going on from the center. So rotating will give you spiral patterns sometimes, but this actually warps things in a spiral way. You can change the sort of XY point of where your spiral is at too. Let me try to accentuate this a little bit by zooming out. So spiral amount. You can change the amount, you can change the angle, you can change the X and Y points that we're sort of spiraling from, and that'll do some pretty amazing stuff. So yeah, the spirals are a lot of fun. People, if you've been paying attention to my Instagram recently, I've been posting a lot about this because I just installed the LFOs for the spirals. And yeah, I gotta make sure to fix that up. The other thing that we have is Kaleidoscope. So Kaleidoscope works a little bit differently from the usual mirror modes. So you can select the amount of segments that are being kaleidoscoped from 1, and you can go up to, like, I think if you change the ranges up here, we can go up to 100, and that's, you know, almost infinite right there. Infinite. It's a Lie group. And you can also change the slice. So that's sort of the focal point of where the kaleidoscope is like kaleidoscoping from. This is the kaleidoscope slice, is if you had like a physical kaleidoscope and you were turning it. That's essentially what you're doing here. And the segments is sort of if you had actually the ability to sort of warp the crystal on your kaleidoscope and add more angles of rotation at will. But yeah, so this will allow you to do some pretty fun stellation things. You can see I'm having a lot of fun right here. But yeah, that's kaleidoscoping. We still have pixelation. I'm apparently never going to give that one up. I added like an XY lock for pixelizing. So this sort of makes it so you can do like traditional mosaic kind of stuff. But you can also turn off the XY lock and then make the X and Y size of the pixels different. And playing around with the pixelizing and the dithering and quantizing is sort of like a pretty fun way to get into pretending like you're doing feedback on an Amiga or something. And you can also choose to mix the feedback with the pixels in a couple of different ways. Most of these will get pretty gnarly pretty quick, and you can also rescale the brightness of the pixel. based upon, or the size of the pixel based on the brightness. That's what this bright scale thing is. It tends to do some pretty wild things. This is usually when people are like, oh, can you make like a glitch thing, something that looks like, you know, MP4 glitches or AVI glitches. Usually I tell them to play around with the pixelization thing on here because that's about the closest thing on that I've made that like gets close to the sort of like AVI glitch kind of things. Reset pixelate. Yeah, so we have all of those additions to the feedback stuff. And then I've also just about, I think I have totally finished putting in all of the LFOs for everything. So we can sort of do this rotating the white pattern around, or moving the white pattern around like that. We can rotate it. You could modulate the tiling. And then we can go into color. I probably need to do a little bit of cleanup here to make it so it's not quite so out of control in terms of the size, but I'll see what I can do to figure that out. We have LFOs for all of the parameters now. Here, let me try to fix this up. I want to keep my face mostly in the mix. Might be a little confusing to folks if they can't see me too often. I don't know if that actually is true. Maybe it's just my vanity. I want to make sure I can keep staring at my at my beautiful beard. Yeah, just, you know, do all the standard kind of feedbacky things with this. You know, I'm just kind of putting random values in here, so I'm not quite sure if this will be anything worth looking at, but yeah, you know, Kaleidoscope is pretty nice with the feedback because it sort of makes anything like feel like it's a bit more structured and patterny than it would be otherwise. And of course, if we get to the point where it's just like, okay, that's not really what I want to see anymore, we just hit reset and it goes back to where it was. We can modulate all the quantization and dithering. We can, of course, modulate X, Y, Z displacement. Modulate these shear matrix things. Modulate fisheye. Oh yeah. Bring these back. Oh wait, no, these are back up here. What? I'm going to modulate Kaleidoscope slice. That's sort of the main thing to do when it seems like things are getting out of control. Or is it? Whoa! That got pretty out of control pretty quick. Let me just do one at a time. So if we modulate Kaleidoscope segments, that's basically going to bring in and out the different kinds of kaleidoscoping symmetries. If we modulate the slice, that's going to sort of be constantly moving the slice that we're grabbing from. Other things we can do is play around with the spiral amount. Woo! Yeah, so pretty ridiculous stuff. So I'm hoping on, as far as release goes, I think we're looking at end of July for like the beta version of, at the very least, Video Waves, if not the whole updated suite. But things are moving along pretty good, and I'm able to sort of maintain a nice schedule, alternating the teaching things I'm doing with limited amounts of sales runs, and trying to spend as much as my time on the video waves development as anything else. And of course, the video waves development is sort of being done sideways with my development of the next hardware thing, which I'm going to be doing a limited sales run thing of this winter. I'll give you more details on what exactly that is. I'm sort of leaning towards something which is going to be an amalgamation of the new video waves things you're seeing here, the gravity waves code that I was working on, and then this sort of like I think I showed you in the last video that I put out, the dual delay line thing. So in the next week I'll actually be doing a lot more work on sort of like putting together the dual delay line video waves, gravity waves mixing thing in this, and configuring some of the controls things. So they'll be optimized for doing real-time stuff and not just mouse-based things. So I would look for some more updates on that probably in the next month or so. But yeah, that about sums it up for what I wanted to show everyone today, what we wanted to talk about here. As always, I recommend folks get behind my Patreon. It's sort of becoming the most useful way I've found to actually support open source code design and the kind of like instructional, educational stuff I'd like to be providing on YouTube as well. Yeah, I will be offering, there will be some Patreon-only things that will be happening on a limited basis, where I'll be uploading some video versions of the courses I've been doing so far. And people who subscribe to the Patreon for certain amounts will be able to access those videos and get some limited amount of like homework reviews from me too. So anyone who needs more motivation to get involved in that, I'll be starting to upload things like that at the end of this month. So getting started with that soon. If you want to get access to some of my classes, we'll be doing that on Patreon first. Probably in a certain amount of time, maybe like 6 months to a year, I'll put everything up on YouTube too. So everything will be available at a certain point. But I'm just sort of trying to like work with like this idea of like encouraging people onto the Patreon too, because it's my main focus right now, and for a bunch of different reasons. And I'll probably go into a lot more details on like what sort of my life and business plans are in a couple of months, because I think that'll be interesting things for folks to hear about. But yeah, in the meanwhile, thanks for all of your support. I'm really grateful to have a community of people out there who are interested in kind of like helping me achieve these weird dreams I have of, trying to like provide like creative software for folks at zero price, and to sort of encourage people to sort of be just generally like nicer to one another and to feel better about themselves. Yeah, so thanks for supporting my weird cult. Thanks for supporting the video synthesis ecosphere in general. And as always, have fun.